The stars outside the viewport looked different here. Commander Jake Harris stood alone on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Starward Hope, watching the unfamiliar constellations spin slowly past. They were deep in voluntary space now, further from Earth than any human had ever traveled before. Jake was 34 years old, with tired eyes and a kind face that had seen too many difficult negotiations. He had been chosen for this mission because he was patient, because he listened more than he talked, because when tensions rose, he stayed calm. These were rare qualities, and they had brought him here to the edge of known space, to make first contact with an empire that had existed for 10,000 years. The Voluntari were not what he had expected. He had studied the files, memorized the protocols, prepared himself for something alien and strange. And they were alien, certainly. Their skin was the color of polished silver, their eyes like liquid amethyst. They moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy by comparison. Their voices carried harmonics that human vocal cords could never produce. But they were also proud, cautious, and deeply traditional. Their empire was built on customs and rituals that stretched back into prehistory. Every word spoken in their courts carried weight. Every gesture had meaning. One wrong move could destroy months of careful diplomacy. Jake had been working on trade agreements for 3 months now. Progress was slow but steady. The Voluntari respected patience, and Jake had plenty of that. What he had not prepared for was the princess. Nyril Valkathros was the third daughter of King Vorath Valkathros, ruler of the Voluntari Empire. She had been assigned as the human delegation's liaison, a role that was considered beneath her station. Jake later learned that she had volunteered for it. She was curious about these strange beings from the small blue planet. She wanted to understand them. The first time Jake met her, she had looked at him like he was a puzzle she intended to solve. Her violet eyes studied his face, his posture, the way he held his hands. She asked him questions that other Voluntari would never ask. What did humans dream about? Why did they laugh? What made them cry? Jake answered honestly. He told her about Earth, about the oceans and mountains, about cities that never slept and small towns where everyone knew each other's names. He told her about love and loss, about hope and fear. He told her things he had never told anyone else. Nyril listened with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. The Voluntari were known for their emotional control. They considered human expressiveness to be primitive, even embarrassing. But Nyril seemed fascinated by it. She leaned in when he spoke. She asked follow-up questions. She remembered everything he said. Over the weeks that followed, their professional relationship became something more. Jake found himself looking forward to their meetings. He would prepare topics to discuss, stories to share, questions to ask. He learned that Nyril loved poetry, that she had secretly written verses about the stars since she was a child. He learned that she felt trapped by her royal duties, that she longed to explore the galaxy like the adventurers in ancient Voluntari legends. She learned about him too. She learned that he had grown up on a farm in Kansas, that he had joined the space program because he wanted to see what was out there. She learned that he was lonely, that command was isolating, that he sometimes wondered if he had made the right choices in life. They began meeting outside of official functions. Late at night, when the diplomatic halls were empty, they would walk through the gardens of the Voluntari Palace. The plants there glowed with soft bioluminescence, casting everything in shades of blue and green. Jake would tell her about earth flowers, about roses and sunflowers, and the way grass smelled after rain. Nyril would describe the floating forests of her homeworld, the crystal caves where her ancestors had first discovered fire. Jake knew he was developing feelings for her. He tried to stop himself. She was an alien princess. He was a human commander on a diplomatic mission. There were 1,000 reasons why this was a terrible idea. But the heart does not listen to reason. It never has, What Jake did not know was that the Voluntari had a secret. Their species possessed the ability to bond, a deep connection that linked two souls together for life. It was not something they could control. It happened rarely, perhaps once in a generation. When it happened, it was considered sacred. The bonded pair became one entity in the eyes of Voluntari law. Nothing could separate them. The bond could only form between two people who had opened their hearts to each other completely. It required trust, vulnerability, and something that the Voluntari called soul resonance. Most Voluntari never experienced it. Those who did considered it the greatest gift the universe could offer. Narration had heard stories about the bond since childhood. She had never expected to experience it herself. Royal marriages were arranged for political reasons, not for love. Her future had been planned since birth. She would marry a noble from a powerful family, produce heirs, serve the empire. Love was not part of the equation, but as the months passed and her connection with Jake deepened, Narration began to feel something changing inside her. There was a warmth in her chest when she was near him, a pull that she could not explain. She told herself it was just curiosity, just fascination with an alien species. It meant nothing. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a formal ceremony, the signing of the first human Voluntari trade agreement. Jake and Narration stood together on a raised platform while diplomats from both species watched. The ritual required them to exchange symbolic gifts. Jake offered a small crystal from Earth, a simple quartz stone that had belonged to his grandmother. Narration offered a silver pendant that contained a drop of water from her homeworld's sacred springs. When their hands touched during the exchange, Narration felt the universe shift. It was like lightning and music and coming home all at once. Every nerve in her body sang. Every thought in her mind cleared. She saw Jake not as an alien, not as a diplomat, but as a soul she had always known. A soul she had been searching for across centuries and stars. The bond had formed. Ancient and unbreakable. Sacred and forbidden. Narration pulled her hand back, her eyes wide with shock. Jake looked confused, concerned. He asked if she was all right. She managed to nod, managed to smile, managed to finish the ceremony without collapsing. But inside, her world had shattered and rebuilt itself around a single impossible truth. She had bonded to a human, and nothing would ever be the same again. Narration did not sleep that night. She lay in her chambers, staring at the ceiling, feeling the bond pulse through her like a second heartbeat. It was warm and constant, a thread of golden light connecting her to Jake across the palace. She could sense his presence, his emotions, his confusion. He did not understand what had happened. He only knew that something had changed. She had to hide this. The thought repeated in her mind like a warning bell. If anyone discovered the truth, the consequences would be catastrophic. A princess of the royal bloodline bonded to an alien? It was more than a scandal. It was an attack on everything the Voluntari believed about themselves. They were the chosen people of the cosmos, the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy. Their blood was pure, their traditions sacred. A bond between species was not just forbidden. It was supposed to be impossible. And yet, it had happened. Narration could not deny what she felt. The bond was real as the stars outside her window. It had chosen them, reached across the boundaries of biology and culture and common sense to link their souls together. She began avoiding Jake. It was cowardly. She knew, but she needed time to think. She sent messages through assistants, rescheduled meetings, invented excuses. When they did see each other at official functions, she kept her distance, her face a mask of polite neutrality. Jake noticed immediately. He was patient at first, assuming she was busy with royal duties. But as the days passed and her distance remained, worry crept into his heart. Had he done something wrong? Had he offended her somehow? The thought of losing her friendship hurt more than he expected. 2 weeks after the ceremony, Jake found her alone in the palace gardens. It was late, the bioluminescent flowers casting shadows across her silver skin. She was sitting on a bench, looking up at the stars, and there was such sadness in her eyes that Jake's heart ached. He sat down beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I know something happened," Jake said softly. "During the ceremony. I felt it too. I just don't understand what it was." Nyrel closed her eyes. She had practiced this conversation 100 times in her mind, imagining different ways to explain, different ways to push him away. But now that he was here, warm and real beside her, all her careful words disappeared. "My people have a gift," she said, "or a curse, depending on how you see it. We call it the bond. It is a connection between two souls, deeper than love, deeper than marriage. It happens rarely. When it does, it cannot be broken. The bonded pair becomes one in the eyes of our law. They share emotions, thoughts, even life force. Where one goes, the other follows." Jake listened carefully. He was beginning to understand, but he needed her to say it clearly. "And this bond," he said slowly, "it formed between us?" Nyrel nodded, tears forming in her violet eyes. "Yes, I do not know how it is possible. It has never happened between a Voluntari and another species. But the bond does not care about what should be possible. It chose you, Jake. It chose us." Jake was quiet for a long time. Nyrel braced herself for his reaction. She expected fear, rejection, anger. She expected him to stand up and walk away, to demand to be released from this connection he had never asked for. Instead, he reached out and took her hand. "Then we figure this out together," he said. Nyrel stared at him. "You do not understand. If my father discovers this, he will try to destroy you. He will see you as a threat to our bloodline, to our entire civilization. You should run, Jake. You should take your ship and go back to Earth and forget you ever met me." Jake shook his head. "I'm not going anywhere. Why?" The question came out as a whisper. "Because where I come from, you don't abandon the people you care about. Not when things get hard. Not ever." He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't know much about your bond or your customs or what any of this means. But I know that I care about you. And I'm not going to let you face this alone." For the first time since the ceremony, Nyrel felt something other than fear. She felt hope, but hope was a dangerous thing in the palace of King Vorath. Ambassador Thelius had been watching the princess for weeks. He was a nobleman from one of the great houses, handsome and ambitious, with eyes like cold stars. He had spent years cultivating a relationship with the royal family, positioning himself as the ideal match for Princess Nyrel. Their marriage would unite two powerful bloodlines and secure his place in history. The arrival of the humans had been an annoyance, but Thelius had not considered them a serious threat. They were primitive creatures, barely worth notice. The princess would grow bored of them soon enough, but the princess had not grown bored. She had grown attached. Thelius had watched her smile at the human commander, had seen the way she leaned toward him during conversations. It was inappropriate, embarrassing, a stain on the dignity of the royal house. And then, at the ceremony, Thelius had seen something that made his blood run cold. He had seen the princess touch the human's hand and freeze. He had seen her eyes widen, her skin flush, her composure shatter for just a moment before she pulled herself together. Thelius knew that look. Every Voluntari knew that look. It was the look of bonding. Impossible. It had to be impossible. And yet Thelius trusted his own eyes. Something had happened between the princess and the human, something that threatened everything Thelius had worked for. He began gathering evidence. He questioned servants, reviewed security footage, collected every scrap of information he could find about the princess's interactions with Commander Harris. He was patient and thorough, building a case that could not be denied. When he was certain of his facts, Thelius requested an audience with King Vorath. The king received him in the throne room, a vast chamber of black stone and silver light. Vorath was ancient, even by Voluntari standards, his face lined with centuries of rule, his eyes hard as diamonds. He listened in silence as Thelius presented his evidence. When the ambassador finished speaking, the silence stretched for a long, terrible moment. "You are certain of this?" the king asked, his voice quiet and cold. "I am, your majesty. The bond has formed. Your daughter has tied herself to an alien." Vorath's hands gripped the arms of his throne until his knuckles turned white. His daughter. His own blood. She had betrayed everything their people stood for. "Summon her," the king commanded. Guards were dispatched. Within the hour, Nyrel stood before her father's throne, her heart pounding, her face pale. "Is it true?" Vorath asked. There was no warmth in his voice, no love, only the cold fury of a king whose dynasty had been threatened. Nyrel considered lying. She considered denying everything, dismissing Thelias's accusations as jealous fantasy. But she could not. The bond would not let her hide. "Yes, father," she said. "It is true." The king's face twisted with rage and disgust. "You have shamed our bloodline. You have spat on 10,000 years of tradition. This bond will be severed, and the human will be expelled from our space." Nyrel felt tears streaming down her face, but her voice remained steady. "Father, the bond cannot be severed. You know this. It is written in our oldest laws. What the cosmos has joined, no power can separate." "Then we shall see," Vorath said, his voice like ice, "what the High Tribunal decides." The Temple of Eternal Oaths stood at the heart of the Voluntari capital, a towering structure of crystal and stone that had witnessed 10,000 years of history. It was here that kings were crowned, treaties were signed, and the most sacred matters of voluntary law were decided. It was here, for the first time in 3,000 years, that the High Tribunal would gather to judge a bonding dispute. Jake stood outside the temple, staring up at its impossible spires. The architecture defied human understanding, curves and angles that seemed to shift when you looked at them directly. Lieutenant Amy Grant stood beside him, her hand resting on the weapon at her hip. Behind them, Dr. Ben Kowalski checked his medical scanner for the 10th time. "You don't have to do this," Amy said quietly. "We can still get you out. The ship is ready. One word and we're gone." Jake shook his head. "I'm not running. Jake, these people want to execute you. Or worse. They've got punishments we don't even have words for." "I know." Jake turned to face his crew, his friends. They had been with him through countless missions, countless dangers. They would follow him anywhere, even into this alien temple where everything was stacked against them. But Nyrel is in there, and I'm not going to let her face this alone. Amy sighed, but there was admiration in her eyes. "You always were too stubborn for your own good." "Human nature," Jake said with a small smile. The temple doors opened, and a voluntary guard gestured for them to enter. Inside, the chamber was vast and ancient, lit by floating orbs that cast silver light across the stone floor. 7 judges sat on raised platforms, their faces hidden behind ceremonial masks of polished metal. These were the eldest of the Voluntari, beings who had lived for millennia, who had seen empires rise and fall, who held the authority to interpret the oldest and most sacred laws. In the center of the chamber, a circular platform was marked with glowing symbols. This was where the accused would stand. This was where judgment would be rendered. King Vorath sat on a throne to the left of the judges, his presence a reminder that this was not just a legal matter. It was personal. His daughter had betrayed his trust, had shamed his bloodline. He wanted blood. Ambassador Thelius stood nearby, barely hiding his satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The human would be condemned, the bond declared invalid, and the princess would have no choice but to accept his proposal. Order would be restored. Nirel entered the chamber through a separate door, flanked by royal guards. She wore the white robes of one awaiting judgment, her silver skin pale, her violet eyes haunted. But when she saw Jake, something shifted in her expression. Hope, courage, strength. Jake was guided to a position at the edge of the chamber, near the gallery where other observers had gathered. Many Valenthari had come to witness this unprecedented event. Some were curious, some were hostile. All were watching. The eldest judge, a female called Matriarch Salith, raised her hand for silence. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of centuries. We gathered today to address a matter of grave importance. Princess Nirel Valkethros, third daughter of King Vorath Valkethros, stands accused of forming a sacred bond with an alien being. Such a thing has never occurred in our recorded history. The implications for our people, our traditions, and our future are profound. She turned her masked face toward the king. His Majesty will present the case against the validity of this bond. Vorath rose from his throne. Despite his fury, he maintained the dignity of his station, his voice measured and cold. The bond is the most sacred gift our people possess. It connects two Valenthari souls across the vast emptiness of space and time. It creates families, strengthens bloodlines, and ensures the continuation of our civilization. For 10,000 years, it has bound our people together. He pointed at Jake, his finger trembling with barely contained rage. This creature is not Valenthari. He is not even civilized by our standards. His species emerged from primitive conditions mere moments ago by the measure of cosmic time. They are short-lived, emotional, unpredictable. They fight among themselves, destroy their own planet, and stumble through the galaxy like children lost in the dark. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Jake kept his face neutral, but inside he felt the sting of every word. The bond cannot have formed between my daughter and this human, Vorath continued. It is biologically impossible. What happened at the ceremony was something else. Perhaps a trick. Perhaps a manipulation. The humans are cunning. They covet our technology, our knowledge, our power. This commander saw an opportunity to gain influence through my daughter, and he took it. Thelius stepped forward to add his testimony. His voice was smooth, persuasive, and utterly toxic. I have studied the humans extensively, Your Honors. They are masters of deception. Their entire history is built on lies, betrayals, and broken promises. Commander Harris has been cultivating a relationship with the princess since his arrival. He has manipulated her emotions, taken advantage of her curiosity about his species. What she believes is a bond is merely the result of clever psychological manipulation. He turned to address the judges directly. Consider the alternative. If we accept that a bond can form between our people and aliens, what does that mean for our civilization? Our bloodlines will be polluted. Our traditions will crumble. Our identity as a people will be lost. We must reject this abomination and expel the humans from our space before they cause any more damage. The chamber fell silent. The judges conferred among themselves. Their voices too low to hear. Then Matriarch Salith spoke again. The tribunal has heard the arguments against the bond. Now we must hear from those who would defend it. All eyes turned to Nirel. The princess stepped forward onto the platform of judgment. The symbols beneath her feet began to glow brighter, responding to her presence. She took a deep breath and began to speak. I did not choose this. I want the tribunal to understand that. I did not seek out the human commander. I did not deliberately open my heart to him. I was assigned as his liaison, and I performed my duties as expected. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. But as I came to know Commander Harris, I discovered something unexpected. Beneath his alien exterior, I found kindness, honesty, and courage. I found a soul that resonated with my own. I found someone who listened when I spoke, who cared about my thoughts and feelings, who treated me not as a princess or a political asset, but as a person. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she did not wipe them away. When the bond formed, I was as surprised as anyone. I tried to deny it. I tried to hide it. I was terrified of exactly this moment, standing here, facing judgment for something I could not control. But the bond is real. I feel it with every breath, every heartbeat. It connects me to Jake Harris in ways I cannot describe. He is part of me now, and I am part of him. She turned to face her father directly. Father, I know I have disappointed you. I know this is not what you wanted from me, but I cannot deny the truth of what I feel. The bond is chosen, and even kings cannot undo what the cosmos has joined. King Vorath's face was stone. He said nothing. Matriarch Salith leaned forward. The princess speaks with conviction, but conviction alone does not prove the validity of a bond. We must examine the evidence more closely. She turned her masked face toward Jake. We will hear from the human. Jake felt every eye in the chamber focus on him. His heart was pounding, but he squared his shoulders and walked forward to stand beside Nyril on the platform of judgment. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Jake stood on the platform of judgment, feeling the weight of 1,000 hostile stares pressing down on him. The symbols beneath his feet pulsed with alien light. The judges watched from behind their masks, silent and unreadable. King Vorath's eyes burned with cold hatred. Ambassador Thelius wore a smirk of anticipated victory, and beside him, Nyril waited, her hand close to his but not quite touching. Her violet eyes filled with fear and hope in equal measure. Jake had faced difficult situations before. He had negotiated with warlords, mediated between hostile factions, stood his ground when everyone around him was panicking. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. He was not just fighting for himself. He was fighting for Nyril, for their future, for the possibility that two different species could find common ground. Matriarch Salith's voice echoed through the chamber. You may speak, human. Tell the Tribunal why we should accept this bond is valid. Jake took a deep breath. He had no prepared speech, no diplomatic training for this specific situation. All he had was the truth. I'm not going to stand here and pretend I understand everything about your culture, he began. His voice was steady, clear. I've been learning since I arrived, and I still have a long way to go. Your traditions are ancient and complex. Your laws are built on foundations that my species was still living in caves when you laid them down. I respect that. I respect all of it. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But I also know what I feel. And what I feel is real. He turned to look at the judges, addressing each of them in turn. You've heard Ambassador Thelius describe humans as manipulators. Deceivers, primitive creatures who stumbled out of the dark by accident. And maybe he's right about some of that. We're not perfect. We've made mistakes. We've hurt each other and ourselves in ways that probably seem barbaric to you. A ripple of agreement passed through the chamber. Jake continued. But here's what he didn't tell you. Humans are also capable of love that defies reason. We fall for people we shouldn't fall for. We fight for causes that seem hopeless. We hold on to hope when every logical argument says we should give up. It's not rational. It's not efficient. But it's who we are. He stepped forward, his voice rising. I didn't plan to care about Princess Nyril. I came here to negotiate trade agreements, to build bridges between our peoples. I was focused on my mission, my duty. But somewhere along the way, I met someone who made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. She listened to me. She understood me. She saw past the uniform and the title and the diplomatic smile, and she found the person underneath. Jake turned to look at Nairo. She met his gaze, tears streaming silently down her silver cheeks. And I saw her too. Not a princess. Not a political symbol. A woman who loves poetry and dreams of exploring the stars. A woman who feels trapped by expectations she never asked for. A woman with more courage and kindness in her heart than anyone I've ever known. He faced the tribunal again. I don't know how your bond works. I don't know why it chose us. But I know that when our hands touched at that ceremony, something changed inside me. It was like waking up from a dream I didn't know I was having. Everything became clearer, more real, more alive. And ever since then, I've felt her with me. Not just in my thoughts, but in my heart. She's part of me now. King Vorath rose from his throne, his voice sharp with contempt. Pretty words from a clever tongue. This is exactly the manipulation I warned about. He seeks to sway the tribunal with emotion rather than evidence. Jake met the king's eyes without flinching. Your Majesty, I know I'm not what you wanted for your daughter. I'm not royalty. I'm not even Velanthari. I'm just a man from a small blue planet who found something worth fighting for. He took another step forward, his voice dropping lower but somehow becoming more powerful. And humans? We don't give up on the things we love. Not ever. You can threaten us, punish us, expel us from your space. But you cannot make us stop caring. You cannot make us abandon the people who matter to us. It's not in our nature. Ambassador Thelius laughed, a cold and mocking sound. Listen to him. The human thinks his stubborn ignorance is somehow admirable. This is precisely why the bond cannot be valid. The Volanthari bond requires two souls of equal worth. This creature is not our equal. He's barely sentient by our standards. Jake turned to face Thelius directly. You keep talking about worth, about bloodlines and traditions and what makes someone worthy. But here's what I've learned about your people since I arrived. You've spent 10,000 years building walls. Walls between yourselves and other species. Walls between different classes of your own society. Walls between what people feel and what they're allowed to express. His voice hardened. Nirael told me that most Velanthari never experienced the bond. That it's supposed to be rare and sacred. And yet you're willing to throw away this miracle because it doesn't fit your expectations. Because it challenges your assumptions about what's possible. He turned back to the judges. Maybe the bond chose us precisely because it's time for those walls to come down. Maybe the universe is trying to tell you something, and you're too proud to listen. The chamber fell silent. Even Thelius seemed momentarily speechless. Matriarch Salith leaned forward, her masked face unreadable, but her posture suggesting deep interest. The human speaks with conviction, she said slowly. But words alone cannot prove the validity of a bond. We must test what he claims. She gestured, and two priests emerged from the shadows carrying a silver bowl filled with glowing liquid. The waters of truth, Salith explained. When two bonded souls touch the water together, it will reveal the nature of their connection. If the bond is true, the water will shine gold. If there is no bond, it will remain silver. If there is deception, it will turn black. She looked at Jake. Are you willing to submit to this test, human? Know that if you have deceived the princess, if you have manipulated her in any way, the waters will reveal it. And the penalty for such deception is death. Jake did not hesitate. I'm willing. King Vorath leaned forward eagerly. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The waters would expose the human's lies, and this nightmare would be over. Thelios could barely contain his satisfaction. The primitive creature had sealed his own fate, but Nirael felt something different. Through the bond, she could sense Jake's emotions. determination, love, and an absolute absence of fear. He believed in what they had. He was willing to stake his life on it. The priest placed the bowl on a pedestal between Jake and Nirael. The liquid inside swirled gently, catching the light. "Place your hands in the water together," Salith commanded, "and let the truth be known." Jake looked at Nirael. She looked at him. Without a word, they reached out and clasped hands, then lowered them together into the waters of truth. For a moment, nothing happened. The liquid remained silver, and Varth's face twisted into a triumphant smile. Then the glow began. It started as a faint shimmer at the edges of the bowl, a warmth that spread through the water like sunrise creeping across a dark landscape. The silver faded, replaced by gold so bright it hurt to look at. The light expanded, rising from the bowl in tendrils that wrapped around Jake and Nirael's joined hands, climbing their arms, surrounding them in a cocoon of radiance. The entire chamber gasped. Some of the observers fell to their knees. Even the judges sat back in shock. King Vorath's face went pale. "No, this is impossible." Thelias took a step backward, his confident smirk replaced by something very close to fear. Matriarch Salith rose from her seat, her voice filled with awe. "In 3,000 years, I have never seen such a reaction. The waters do not merely confirm the bond. They celebrate it." She turned to face the chamber. "The truth has been revealed. The bond between Princess Nirael Val Kethros and Commander Jake Harris is not only valid. It is one of the strongest bonds the waters of truth have ever witnessed." Jake and Nirael stood together in the golden light, their hands still joined, their hearts beating as one. Whatever judgment came next, this moment could never be taken from them. They had proven their love was real. Now, they just had to survive what came after. The tribunal deliberated for one full day and night. Jake was not permitted to leave the temple during this time. He was given a small chamber to wait in, bare stone walls and a narrow bed, with guards posted outside his door. They were not unkind, but they were firm. He was to stay until the judgment was rendered. Nirael was confined to her own chambers in the palace, surrounded by servants who watched her with a mixture of pity and fascination. Word of what had happened at the tribunal had spread through the capital like wildfire. Everyone was talking about the human who had passed the waters of truth, about the bond that had defied 10,000 years of tradition. King Vorath retreated to his private rooms and refused to see anyone. The rage that had sustained him had given way to something more complicated. He had been so certain that the waters would expose the human's deception. He had staked his authority on it. And he had been wrong. Ambassador Thelias was not seen in public after the tribunal. Some said he had locked himself in his estate, humiliated beyond recovery. Others whispered that he had already begun plotting his next move. Men like Thelias did not accept defeat easily. In the gallery of the temple, Amy Grant and Ben Kowalski kept vigil. They took turns sleeping, one always watching, both ready to act if things turned violent. They had backup plans and extraction routes, weapons hidden in places the Valanthari would never think to look. They would not abandon their commander, but as the hours passed and no violence came, they began to hope that maybe, just maybe, this would turn out all right. When the tribunal finally reconvened, the chamber was packed with observers. Every noble family had sent representatives. Scholars and historians had come to witness history being made. Even common Valanthari had gathered outside the temple, watching the proceedings through broadcast screens that had been set up in the public squares. Jake was brought before the judges once more. He looked tired but unbroken, his jaw set with determination. Nirael joined him on the platform, having been escorted from the palace under heavy guard. Their eyes met, and in that look was everything they could not say aloud. "I love you. I'm with you. Whatever happens." King Vorath took his place on the throne. His face was a mask, revealing nothing of his thoughts. He had spent the night wrestling with his pride and his duty, with what he wanted and what the law demanded. The outcome of that struggle remained to be seen. Matriarch Salith rose to address the chamber. The silence was absolute. The High Tribunal has deliberated on the matter before us. We have examined the evidence, consulted the ancient texts, and prayed for guidance from the cosmos. We have reached a unanimous decision. She paused, and in that pause, Jake felt Nirel's hand find his. Her fingers were trembling. So were his. For 10,000 years, our people have believed that the sacred bond could only form between voluntary souls. This belief was so fundamental that we never questioned it. We never imagined that the cosmos might have other plans. Salith gestured toward Jake and Nirel. But the waters of truth do not lie. They cannot be deceived or manipulated. They showed us something unprecedented. A bond as strong and pure as any in our recorded history, formed between a daughter of our people and a son of humanity. Murmurs swept through the chamber. Salith raised her hand for silence. Some would say this is an aberration, a mistake to be corrected. But the Tribunal takes a different view. Perhaps this bond is not an ending but a beginning. Perhaps the cosmos is showing us that our understanding has been incomplete. That there are more things in this universe worthy of connection and love than we ever dared to imagine. She turned to face the king directly. Your Majesty, we understand your concerns for the royal bloodline and the traditions of our people. These concerns are valid and shared by many. But the law is clear. The bond is sacred. It cannot be severed by royal decree, political ambition, or fear of the unknown. Her voice rose, filling the chamber with ancient authority. The bond between Princess Nirel Val Kethros and Commander Jake Harris is true and valid under the oldest laws of our people. No force in this galaxy can separate what the cosmos has joined. The Tribunal has spoken. For a long moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then King Vorith stood. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. His face was still a mask, but something had shifted in his eyes. The cold fury had faded, replaced by something that might have been grief or acceptance or simply exhaustion. The Tribunal has spoken, he repeated slowly, and I will honor its judgment. The words seemed to cost him something vital, but he said them. And in saying them, he changed the course of history. Ambassador Thelius, watching from the back of the chamber, turned and walked away without a word. His ambitions had crumbled to dust. His carefully constructed plans had been destroyed by something he had never believed possible. A human's stubborn refusal to give up Dot in the gallery. Amy Grant let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like hours. Holy hell, she whispered. He actually did it. Ben Kowalski just shook his head in wonder. That's our commander. Too stubborn to know when he's beaten. Nirel turned to Jake, tears streaming freely down her silver cheeks. For the first time since the ordeal began, she allowed herself to believe it was really over. They had won. Against all odds, against an empire, against the way of 10,000 years of tradition. They had won. Jake pulled her into his arms, holding her close, feeling her heartbeat sync with his own through the bond that connected them. Around them, the chamber erupted in chaos as nobles argued, historians took notes, and ordinary Voluntari tried to process what had just happened. But Jake and Nirel were barely aware of any of it. In that moment, they were the only two people in the universe. Later, after the ceremonies and speeches and formal declarations, they walked together through the palace gardens. The bioluminescent flowers glowed softly in the darkness, casting everything in shades of blue and green. The stars above were the same stars they had looked at during those first conversations, when they were still strangers trying to understand each other. What happens now? Jake asked quietly. Nirel considered the question. I do not know. Everything will change. My people will need time to adjust to this new reality. Some will accept it. Others will resist. The path ahead will not be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. She smiled at that, a real smile that lit up her face. You humans and your stubborn optimism. It's gotten me this far. They walked in silence for a while, enjoying the peace, the warmth of each other's presence. Will you stay? Nirail asked eventually. Here, with me. Jake thought about Earth, about his family, about the life he had left behind. He thought about the Starward Hope, still orbiting above, ready to take him home whenever he gave the word. Then he looked at Nirail, at the woman who had become part of his soul, and he knew there was only one answer. I'm not going anywhere, he said, in the observation gallery above the garden. Amy Grant watched her commander walk hand in hand with an alien princess under alien stars. She grinned and elbowed Ben Kowalski. Told you humans were too stubborn to lose. Ben laughed. You think Earth is ready for this? A human married into alien royalty? Earth better get ready, because I have a feeling this is just the beginning. She was right. The bond between Jake Harris and Princess Nirail Val Kethros was just the first thread in a tapestry that would eventually bind two civilizations together. It would not be easy. There would be conflicts and setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt, but it would begin with love. With two people who refused to give up on each other. With a human who stood before a tribunal and declared that where he came from, you did not abandon the people you cared about. Not when things got hard, not ever. And as Jake and Nirail walked together into the alien starlight, the galaxy seemed a little smaller, the distance between worlds a little less impossible, and a future a little brighter than it had been the day before. Because when a human chooses love, not even kings and tribunals can stand in the way.